I started in a game industry since 2006, I suppose, and since 2011 I'm in Sperasoft, starting when I was young like you guys. And you can see what will be with you after 15 years working in yeah. My experience includes a lot of titles. Among them, the Rainbow Six, Assassin's Creed, Anthem, Skyforge, Star Wars, and you can read it here without my help, actually. So yeah, and during my work, I work on different models. I work as a character artist, I work as a hard surface artist, as a generalist, and so on. And finally, last few years, I mainly work as a hard surface artist because it's cool. That's why. Okay, what is hard surface and where it is usable? The hard surface, generally we have split up all our models into two parts. The hard surface models and the soft model surfaces. Now let's call it organic modeling, but all the garments, everything that you can flex and bend should be organic modeling. In this case, I was hard surface modeling and everything that you cannot bend easily. So yeah, every object that stands, tuned or casts, everything that animated in a different way, it's our hard surface stuff. Where it's usable, almost all areas. Even in a character production, there is a lot of elements, a lot of objects that's actually hard surfaces, and all rules that we will talk today are applicable for them. But in general, it's, let's start from the first point, the consistency of models. So, all edges, all planes, and everything on a hard surface model should be consistent, should have the consistent widths and thicknesses. It's not so obvious as could seem, but in my practice, from time to time, I'm meeting the models when the artists made a perfect high poly model with the perfect lines and perfect edges, and then they suppose that they can make low poly not so, not so clear, with some waviness, maybe with some not so precise edges. And they think that the normal will fix everything because they make the maps and the all digitalization and all highlights will be baked from the high poly. And that's why they suppose that the low poly could be not so precise. It's not so. Actually, it will be visible. The trick here is that when the artist look on his baked model, it looks perfect, but it looks perfect in static. When you start editing, when it becomes animated, all the issues with waveness, with wobblings become visible in dynamics. So you can see on the right side, pretty good model actually. A lot of details, a lot of hard surface elements, filled with some meat and so on. But if you see on these areas, all these separate edges has inconsistent widths on edges, in corners, and so on. So, if it's a subdiv model, about subdiv models we will talk a bit later, after smoothing they will have inconsistent, unequal widths on the surface, and it will guide to a different light spotting. So when the model will be turned around, these edges will look dirty and noisy. So if you want to make models like on the left side of the screen with a perfect aging, perfect material definition even, because it has an influence on its too, you need to keep keep your hand surfaceably on all stages, starting from high poly and on low poly, and even if you, especially if you making a Meatball model and so on. The next one, light spot control. When you're making your model and you're checking your consistency and everything is okay, everything is perfect, you can see the model with this blue color, it's made perfectly. All the shapes is pretty clean. It's from the first look, it's actually perfect, especially the rendering is good and so on. But we have an issue here. If you notice this, spotlights on its body, help me. Yeah, this spotlights, they are breaking down right between on a paneling. So if you see on this car, there is no issues here. All sports lights going through different panels in a correct way. Why it happens? Even when you make the whole body of this car without this paneling, all works fine. When you start breaking it down, when you start making a separate edges or playing with vertex normal weights or something, it can be broken. It can be different in a one point, but on a different panels. And finally, it will guide you to some noisy model. Yeah. From first look, it looks solid, but actually, when you start to checking details, you will notice all these issues on your hard surface. Especially on the models like vehicles, like cars, with clear coat shading. It's visible much more because of its shading model with a very hard and rough reflection and so on. So this gives show you the difference. Yeah, this model without vertex normal correction, this one with it. By the way, you can find this tutorial on the internet, the master car creation in Blender. It's really cool tutorial. It shows you how to avoid all these mistakes, how to deal with it. It will guide you how to do it in Blender, but actually all these instruments and tools, all our DCC tools have. So you can make all this stuff in Maya, in Max, or whenever you're modeling. The next one is a non-destructive modeling and parametric force flow. It's important for hard surface more than for the organic modeling too, because organic modeling usually it's a solid model that you just sculpt in a ZBrush, adding in elements, very small elements, and if you need some tweaks, if you receive some feedbacks and you need any correction, it's not a big deal to make it in a character creation. But when we work with a hard surface, especially if the models is pretty complex, like this part of engine, it's a part of engine. Yeah. It's become really an issue. If you need just a small tweak, maybe scale up some elements here, make it replace one to another, it become a headache for you because of all these support edges, because a lot of linked elements that influence to each other and so on and so on. So before you start your work, you need to analyze your model. You need to find a way how you can parameterize your as much as possible. If you can use instances, arrays, you should use it. If you can if you can apply chamfers or something with modifiers, with any other tools that could be easily undo and then apply again, then do it. So if you make all this stuff on your final edit poly, and then you will need to make some tweaks, it will cause you to lose a lot of time. So analyze it first, and then model, and keep. Sometimes, when you work, and especially if you have a time limits, if you hurry up, then you decide, okay, I will just collapse all the stuff and make some quick tweaks, nobody noticed, and so on. Don't do it. Just go to smoke, drink a cup of coffee, and then come to work without hurriness, and make all the every steps in correct way. And you can see this. It's not about a parametric workflow, but this is about a parametric and generative design. Right now, since the CAD systems, invade the game dev, a lot of hard surface modelers start working in a CAD systems. I will talk about it a bit later. And these systems allow you to create a lot of interesting patterns, interesting details in a generative design. You can see all these patterns. They are not made by hands. It's all generated in a way like you maybe, if someone trying to work in a substance designer with a node system, and you create some parametric materials. In such way, such patterns make, but not in materials, but in geometry. And they looks cool. It will be more often and often you will encounter it on a hard surface models on an ArtStation or somewhere. And in production, they are more and more usable from now. So it will be good for you just to check such things. The Dynamo for Fusion was 360, Greg's Hopper for Arena, and such tools. Okay, the next one. Let's talk about the specificity and the difference from organic modeling. First of all, we don't have a traditional topology. You maybe know how we do it in a character design. We make a high poly, where we are satisfied and happy with it. Then we just turn off our mind and starting to clicking on it and creating the new topology for the low poly model. And this workflow will guide you to a wavy and noisy hard surface model, actually. We cannot afford to make it especially on very complex models. It could be, this workflow could exist on a very small models, on some small props, like this chair or table or something like this. But since you start making something more complex, this way of creation, low poly, is not suitable. What we have to do, we need to work in non-destructive workflow. In this case, our low poly will be already done when you finish your high poly. Everything you need is to remove some modifiers, maybe load your storage stage where you don't have some extra sub-advantages, and this will be your low poly actually. So we don't need to make it. We just need to store it from the previous stage of our model. If you cannot, sorry guys, you just need to recreate it, like you do with high poly. Okay. Unusual modeling tools. We have a bunch of tools that is usually not usable in organic modeling because they don't need such complex shapes. Actually, just work in an easy way, just sculpting, and we need to make all this stuff. So yeah, first of all, it's a booleans. Hope you know what is it. Yeah, it's it's a tool where two or more shapes just influence on each other. You can see it on this small GIF animations. You can cut one from another, add one to another, intersect and receive the result of intersection of different tools. And this is actually core difference between organic and hard surface modeling. The organic modeling has an additive nature. We create, for example, sphere, and then starting to sculpt, adding mesh, adding details, adding volumes, something like this. When we work with on hard surface models, we have a subtraction nature of modeling. We take a base shape and start to subtract elements from it. And this is the way how we get the forms that we need. Yeah, we add something, of course, but I'm speaking about general, philosophy of modeling stuff. Yeah, next one, the flow geometry. Another thing that is not usable on a character models. Because it's flexible, because most of its elements is bending, so the float geometry can be used there. They use just a normal bake, usually unique. But we can, a bit cheat in our process, because if we have most of our shapes have a rigid nature, so we can use elements that is not actually welded in it. It can just float a bit above it, but if the base polish is perfectly aligned to each other, you will not notice the difference. Or, in other way, if you cannot use the float geometry itself, you can bake it on a planes and then use it as a, for example, trim or tile geometry textures. And this will help you to keep clean your topology on a main model, and it is one of the elements of a non-destructive modeling. So if your project pipeline allow you to use float geometry itself, use it as much as possible. If you cannot, bake it. The same thing with decals. Decals, it's pretty the same like float geometry, except that it hasn't geometry itself. It's have all the textures in it. We can separate decals in two types of decals. Geometry decals, like on this two images, where you have planes, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and some complex texture in it with an alpha channel, with normal, with POM, and so on. And when it's applied, when it's perfectly projected to the surface, you receive pretty cool elements, pretty cool detailization without investing too much geometry and time on it. The second type of decals is the projected decals. Modern game engines, most of them, Unreal, Unity, Frostbite, all of them support projected decals. The difference is that they don't have even these small geometry pieces that is aligned to the surface. It's just a material that is projected on a surface with an engine. It don't need correct UV on this geometry, on your target geometry. It uses triplanar projection, so it's pretty universal and can be used. Another thing that you need to to think about during your production is hard surface mechanical authenticity. Yeah. Mostly all shapes in a complex hard surface details. If we speak about some mechanical stuff like this one, their shapes is guided through its animations, through its how it moves, how it connects to another elements, how it's attached to something, and so on. Sometimes even concept artists that provide you a concept of a hard surface element didn't think enough of it. And when you start modeling, you start to realize that the elements that you start making will not work correctly in a way how it's drawn in a concept art. So I advise you to make very raw blockout model first, then make a technical animation, see how it connects, how it's moved, how it's rotated, where its limits of animation, and then it will show you some maybe issues on the concept art if you have it, or if you don't have your concept art, or it's just a silhouette lines and all the rest of work is dropped to you. In this case, it will be much more clear for you how the metal, how the elements should look. Sometimes you even don't know how it will look. You just need to make some generic stuff. You make a technical animation for it, and then start cutting out element to element just to make the animation work perfectly. And after it, you will see that you already have the shape you need, with a lot of interesting details, with a lot of some hard surface, holes, the areas where your blocks will be, and so on. So use it, don't forget about it, and make animation as soon as possible. Because if you make your model as it is on a concept, then make all your further steps with the texturing and so on, then this model goes to the animators, and they will loop it back to you because it's not working on animation. You will need to make huge amount of work. You will need to step back on the very first stage, make the corrections. So make the technical animation first, even before the hype. The texturing. Texturing is different too. You know how it's going, I hope you know how it's going on a character art. Usually all character art have its own unique textures. They don't care about even textile density. They just know that they need, for example, 4K textures. They bake it and paint and so on. We cannot afford to make it in such a way in hard surface, usually. Of course, sometimes you can. If your hard surface model, for example, is just a character, robot, like Hala models, for example, yeah, you make it in the same way. You just bake it. You just know your texture size and don't keep anything in mind else. But if you work on an environment, on something huge like the spaceships, like vehicles, the big vehicles or something like this, you cannot use unique textures. You will need to use tiles, dreams, and everything that can be reused in different ways. Maybe a few years before, maybe 10, they are used as itself. So we use just the dreams, and we use it on a whole models, on a whole, I don't know, environments. It looks a bit repeatable, but we had our limits. Right now, with all these streams and tiles textures, we use different lengths, different full screen effects, or maybe some textures, some parametric textures based on a vertex colors or something to hide all these tiles, to hide repeatables on the textures. So usually you don't see that the whole environment may be made from the one texture because of all extra elements, extra steps. For example, this environment made the whole texture made with only one this texture, and it's grayscale, you see. So the rest of it made with lighting, with the vertex colors, with ambient occlusion, based on vertex colors, and so on and so on. So it's, yeah, if you want to go in deep into the environment art, they have their own branch of specific, but you just have to know that when you make the big environments or big shapes or big, or something big, you don't need to make the big unique texture. You will work with the prefabs, tiles, streams, and so on. It will be some kind of Lego. You just take small parts of geometry, take small parts of texture, take small parts of everything, and combine it, and finally get something interesting. Okay. Let's briefly take a look on modeling techniques that we used in hard surface. I can underline 4 of them, another artist underline another 4 of them, but since today I am a speaker, let's speak about my 4 techniques in subdiv modeling, live boolean, ZBrush, Meatball, and CAD. Computer-aided design. Yeah. First of all, subdiv modeling. Mostly usable, mostly usually when artists start modeling stuff, start to learn 3D modeling, they starting from subdiv. Yes, it's a very common technique. When you make a low poly cage, assign the support edges in edges that should be, more sharp, then subdue it and get your clean and smooth shapes here. As an advantage of these techniques, I can point few stuff. It's a common technique. It's pretty understandable. It's easy to learn how to do it. You have a good control on the topology because you make it by hands. And so if you have some tools for non-destructive modeling, you can control the amount of your support edges, or maybe you can use creases in some cases, not everyone, not every time, but you can. So in this case, you will have a pretty good control on your geometry for further tweaks, feedbacks, and so on. The disadvantages is that is pretty long time to make models, headache, and you cannot avoid it. And the final, and right now it's mostly most important thing that it's really difficult to make a complex shape. If you just check modern hard surface models on ArtStation, for example, it's just an explosion of very complex elements. You cannot achieve such result with subdiv modeling. It will take years to make some models that Chinese artists makes in a week. So it is suitable for some smaller props, maybe some elements for characters or something like this, or maybe if you work in a project with some stylistic art style, cartoonish and so on, then you can use subdiv and don't think about anything else. Yeah, and it's heavy. It's heavy if you don't have a top-end desktop. Then the complex model made it in subdiv will freeze your work and can make it the headache too. Next one technique is a live boolean in ZBrush. It's appeared not far long ago, something in 2017 maybe, after the Ubisoft workshop, when they show how they made the weapons for the what the game it was, Division, the first Division. Yeah, they make in a such pipelines, and it's become very popular. Why it's popular? Because the live boolean instruments in a ZBrush, it's really awesome tool. It is live and it is boolean. So you can add and subtract and intersect elements on the air. You can see the result exactly on your screen. You can correct it, and it's a really fast workflow, really good. And after a few other steps like polishing edges, retopology, and so on, you can get pretty clear, pretty interesting, pretty complex high poly models with these techniques. So, as an advantage of it, I can underline that this method is easy, because you see what you see is what you get. Yeah? Everything that is on a screen, then you can see it right now and correct it. It's very high speed because of its too. And during when you work in a ZBrush, you have a superior control on your high poly. So if you don't collapse your live boolean setup, you can correct anything you made before very easily. But this is a disadvantage when you export it in some traditional VCC tool like Maxomaya, because when you export your model after decimation, after you finish your work here, it is completely uneditable. You can do nothing with that model, and don't even try. I saw that sometimes you need a bit scale something in a few percent, and you think that okay, I can make it in a 3ds Maxomaya. Nobody noticed. I don't want to re-export it from ZBrush. Don't even touch it, because we work with hard surface models. You broke your highlights on a models in this area, and it will be so visible that you don't even expect how visible it will be. So if you need some corrections, then yeah, make a 10 minutes break, leave with this, and then go back to the ZBrush, make a correction, re-export the stuff again. The second one is the chompers. In a traditional pipeline with the live booleans, when you finish creating your live booleans, you apply the polishing on a whole model, and you get the smoothing on the edges on the model. They're clean, they're good, but they're equal on the whole model. It's because of it, the models, even if it's super realistic, super detailed, and so on, because of this equal chambers, they look a bit cartoonish. Because in the real models, different edges has a different spot highlights, and these highlights place and make the realistic look. If you have the same highlights on all edges, it looks cartoonish. It looks like it's a bit underlined with a same pencil. You can fight with it. You can work with it. You can split your model in different subtools and make the chambers different for different parts. But it's took time, and it's a bit branch of this workflow, and you will need some extra work to make it. So this is it for those techniques. And yeah, the last one is that your high poly model can be used as a, the low poly model. You can try to apply Boolean, don't apply any other steps. Export it as a low poly, but your topology will be not perfect from user say, and actually you will need to retopolize it in any way and apply some extra work to it. And in some cases, you will need to recreate it from the scratch. Sorry about it. But this times you will compensate on a high poly stage because high poly is made it super very quickly. So it's a really workable workflow. If you don't know how it's working, take a look, take your time, check it on YouTube in details and so on. Meatball model. This is actually the main workflow for the hard surface in a game design, in a game dev. Because this method allows us to make smooth, clean models without baking anything, without baking normal maps and edges, without baking some details. We can make it with geometry, save tons of polygons, so still get the pretty detailed models using the previously elements and tools that we talked before. All this flow geometry, decals, trim textures, and so on. They are exactly perfectly applicable for this workflow. What is the main rule? No, it's not a rule. The main way why the pretty low poly model looks like high poly, because we operate with vertex normals. We correct the normals of the vertices on the edges to make them looks like we want. You can see on this top image that, for example, this is a high poly element. This is an element where every polygon has its own vertex normal, and in this case we see the hard edge between all the polygons. This is the average where all normals are averaged. In this case, our models will look as soft, as rounded as possible, but not every geometry detail allows us to make such thing. It is usable for the cylinders, for example, without the capes made of spheres or so on. And the most 99% of these elements from this picture on the bottom made it with weighted normals. I will not describe it right now in detail how we should make it and what is for. You can check it, and maybe we will talk about it if you apply to the Sperasoft during our daily work. But you just need to know that if you make your mid-poly models, then you automatically should think about face-weighted normals. So the advantages is pretty clear. You don't need the of baking. Clean topology without support edges. Sometimes you need it, but not so much like in a subject modeling. And yeah, good for using with a tile and tree pipeline. It's good for the flow geometry and everything that we speak before. As disadvantages, mid-poly modeling cannot be applied for low-poly models. It's obvious. And it cannot be applied for the very small models, because even small elements should have utilization, and in this case, even in a mid-poly pipeline, you will not have enough just geometry for it. So small elements, small props, and something like this will be done in a traditional manner with baking maps and so on. And careful vertex normal control. It's stupid. Sometimes you can just apply a weighted normal modifier in Blender or 3ds Max and forget about it. Sometimes you need some handiwork, even if your model is pretty complicated. In this case, you need to tweak the normals of different ages by your hands, and it will do time. Yeah. Okay, the last techniques I want to highlight today is computer-aided design. The application like Fusion 360, like Reno, like, I don't know what, SolidWorks, but I've never seen if anyone works in SolidWorks. Right now, usually guys trying to work in Fusion. It's the way of completely parametric modeling. Actually, you don't create the geometry itself in a Fusion. You create the mass that generate the geometry for you. So you see these models, but you don't see the models. It's not a models. It's a splines, it's a curves, it's a math, it's a functions that visualized as a model. And then you can export it to your DCC as a traditional geometry, of course, but you should know that everything here is described in functions. So, as an advantages of this method is that it's super fast, especially for the hard surface concepting, when you don't know what you want, but you need to make something with some defined silhouette. Then this application is for you for sure, because you can super fast create stuff, make booleans, make chamfers, then correct it, make them somewhere else. So such weapons could be created in a few hours. And you see how detailed it is. In subdiv pipeline, it will take maybe 3 or 4 weeks to make it. But in a cut, you can make it in a few hours if you are pretty comfortable with tools and with its disadvantages. Actually. Yeah, and again, during your work, because of its parametric nature, it's super easy to control your shape. Everything you do is stored in a history, and everything you can change. For example, if you made some specific bits of chamfer somewhere at the very beginning of your modeling, then add a super lot of stuff and see that you need it a bit bigger, a bit smaller. You don't need to remake everything. You need to go just on the timeline on the very beginning, change the few numbers, and everything will be recreated for you in a second. Yeah, and because of it, it's much easier to make more realistic models here, because you control all chamfers differently. You control shape. It's easy to make it complex. More with Fusion allows you to make a technical animation and correct form in different K-frames that you created. So, for example, you have something that is open and closed. You model it in an open position, then you model it closed, stop on this frame, and correct form for the closed state. And then go back to open it, and so on and so on. So you can play with it, you can play with animation and correct form in a way you need for this animation work correctly. As a disadvantages, it's pretty similar to the live boolean. It is a completely uneditable mesh after export. And it's a really riddle for me, because in Fusion, for example, when you convert your model, your working model to a mesh, it creates perfectly exported to the Maya or Max. It's triangulated for sure, and it can triangulate it in some interesting way. Why I can't export something that I already see on my monitor, I don't understand. So if some of you can understand it for me, or maybe you know how to export exactly the same mesh that I see inside the Fusion to Maya, it will be okay, but trust me, it's impossible. Every time you will get a triangulated model and will live with it and will work with it. Yes, you can drop it to the Blender, remove triangles, fix the shape and so on, but it's an extra steps that will eat your time, eat your nerves, and there is no, you will not be sure that everything will be correct. I think that some handiwork will need in this, but still. The main disadvantage that these applications, these CAD systems, not always include in a pipelines. Not every time you can use it because of you don't have it on a project. It's not because you need to work in a Maya and so on and so on. And if, for example, Blender comes to a production and it's used more and more, and it's not so unique. Speaking about Fusion, it's pretty unique for now. So sometimes it's a problem to get it on a project. And the last one, it's pretty tricky to make a curved shapes. As soon as you work with such rectangular shapes making from boxes with chamfers, it's okay, you can do it, and we'll have fun. As soon as you need to make something looks like organic, some generative form or something like this, when you will need to go to the subdiv modeling and then continue working with in Fusion, this will be a headache. It is possible, but it's not fun. Okay, and the last topic is a way of improvements, how you can improve yourself as a hard surface artist. First of all, the visual experience and mental library. It's obvious. Every time you work, you need two monitors, because on the second monitors, every time should be hard surface models, different, ArtStation, Pinterest, everything you need. Every time you work, you should have some on your peripheral, monitor. You need the image of something you want to achieve. So don't think that it's not important. It's important really. Even if you know how to work, if you don't need some extra references or something like that in any way, just turn the ArtStation, choose some works that you like, and let it be on your second monitor forever, and switch these elements as much as possible. Why it's important? Because especially on the complex models, sometimes, not sometimes, it's pretty always. Concept artists make the general shape, make some general elements and some art vision of your model. But when you start modeling, you or your leader will realize that it's not working in such way. You need much more details, you need much more paneling, you need much more some intersections, some super small details, and so on and so on. And you cannot, every time go into Pinterest and find it. You can, and you will do it, but it took your time, and much easy if you had all these elements in your mind. When you know how it looks in real production, how it looks in games with stylized, how it looks in, for example, you know how it looks in Java, how it looks in Star Citizen, or so on. It will speed up your work greatly, and you will make more interesting shape even if you don't think about it. You just, if your mental library will be huge, you cannot make poor models because you know how to make poor models. And in addition to some renders from the ArtStation, I can advise you to see the real manufacturers too, because first of all, that our modeling techniques is pretty close to real manufacturing, and sometimes the details and the shapes that comes from the real stamping is quite different than you make in our DCC tools. Yeah. For example, the regular extrude and bevels that we made in the Maya and 3ds Max usually looks different in a real manufacturing when it's just cut it from the cylinder, like on this picture, so bended or something, and forms looks different than in our artificial production. So just notice that difference and try to recreate it in your work. Daily modeling it's important to just store 1 hour in a day before you go to bed. Choose some really something like, I don't know, even this is too complex for the speed modeling part of it, I suppose, this one. And you can quickly model it. It will help to keep your hands warm. It will keep you in a good, conditions modeling, and every time you will use something, you will learn something new in very small details. But if it will be your daily hobby, after a year or two, it will boost your skills and boost your even mental library, because every day you will see a new concept and so on. Yeah, it's very important and has a great value for you as an artist. Knowledge sharing. Took part in any activities like this one or some online activities, master classes. Don't be humble to ask questions, especially if you work in an office. I know a lot of artists that just sit alone in front of their desktops and don't even want to see everyone here. And it's guide to huge mistakes and more rework, and losing our time. Don't be humble, ask questions, especially if you have a seniors or lead artists. They're really happy to answer the 101st time of the same dumpy questions, and it's their work. Yeah, we look like this guy usually when we encounter the same questions in years. And take your time and at least briefly learn the basic art fundamentals like the composition, coloring, element distribution, all of this. You need to know what is a stable composition, dynamic composition, what is the rhythm, and so on. It will help you to make your models more interesting, especially in the case when the concept art is not so clear. And in addition, it will help you to understand the concept art much better, because all the 2D artists that will provide you a concept art, they are really good to know all this stuff, and even they don't think about it, they will create their concept art and will guide with following these rules. So it will be easy for you to model if you will clearly understand how it will be drawn. So yeah, find these books. There are a lot of books about composition, and they usually talk about pretty the same, but with different words. So you can choose anything. Okay, it's more or less everything that I want to talk about today. Let's underline the most important stuff here. It's first of all, to be a good hard surface model, what you need. You need a visual experience and mental library. I drop it on the first place because it's really, it's not only important, you know, because it's easier for you to make blah 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 everything that I talked before, but you know that modeling techniques you can learn in a month or two, maybe three. But the mental library, you need a few years to create it in your head, and not only a few years of working. It's not working. You need a few years of working on your mental library and your visual experience. A few years of searching stuff, learning. Watching videos with a real production, watching our station of interest, you need to work on it. So don't think that you just will work a few years in the game industry on hard surface and your mental library will be created by itself. No, it won't. You need to work on it, you need to check and blah blah blah. The topics that I highlight at the very end, I put at the very top here. Because yes, it's the same point. Their composition need a pretty much practice and work on it, and it needed time to use it in a correct way. So when you start your career, pay to these 2 points pretty much of your time. The third one, ability to work with unclear concept art without blueprints. Yeah, it's the next element of this chain. So if you will be comfortable with first one, then unclear concepts. Okay. It's become too boring, yeah? Okay, I'm finishing actually. Yeah, then it will be much more easier to work with unclear concept arts. On the first time, just don't be humble, don't ask your leads and discuss with them if something unclear. After time pass, you will be able to make it by yourselves. Yeah. So far, knowing Technics and DCC tools with most usable plugins. It's pretty obvious. Just make few works and check the latest plugins that come to the hard surface. There are a lot of them comes because of our parametric workflow, and because of it, a lot of plugins made for the hard surface specifically. Not much of them for the character, but for the hard surface, you have a hard offset and no decal machine and so on and so on. So don't miss it. Known difference has pipelines that I told before. It's basic animation skills. For the technical art and technical animation, you need to know at least how to make the keyframes and make some technical animation to see how it works for the modeling. Yeah, good planning. Your workstage for the non-destructive modeling, accuracy, we started from it, yeah. And if you still will have a time after all of this, try to be familiar with the game engines, at least that is available for you. For example, Unreal Engine and Unity, it will help you a lot, because all other homebrew engines are pretty the same, with a few differences, but if you will be comfortable with at least Unreal and Unity, it will be not a problem, and it will be not a big deal to work in all other game engines. Yeah, and that's absolutely criticism. It's last but not least, listen what leaders talk to you, don't be offensive, try to understand what he's working, what to say, and usually leaders want you to become better and better, because they don't want to work too much with your models on feedbacks and so on. Okay, thank you, that's all that I want to say. Any questions you can ask now, or maybe when we will on a coffee break. You can come to me and ask anything you want.
Thanks to you, thanks everybody. We welcome you to the main hall downstairs for a coffee break and networking with our speakers. Thank you.